All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Got a jam-packed show for you today. We're hitting 3 more teams in our season preview series. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the Sacramento Kings, and the Orlando Magic. Some very, very interesting teams. The Magic and the Kings in particular, upgrading to starting spots. And the Cleveland Cavaliers more or less running back the same team. They're starting 5 locked in for the foreseeable future. So a couple of different types of pathways that we're going to be getting into. You guys know the drill before we get started. Subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter, @_JasonLT, so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. Starting next week, when we go down to 1 team per day, we're going to start hitting a mailbag at the tail end of every episode. All right, let's talk some basketball. So number 17 in our power rankings, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Not too much to get into in their offseason. They lost Damian Jones, Isaiah Mobley, and Marcus Morris. They added JT Thor from South Sudan, who had that super impressive game against Team USA in the exhibition. Luke Travers, a player they drafted a while ago, who's coming over from Australia on a 2-way contract, and they drafted Jalen Tyson in the late first round. All changes to their back end of their roster. They're more or less the same team they were last year. I don't think any of those guys will be in their regular rotation this year. It'll be guys that probably come in and out of the lineup based on injuries. We'll see how things progress over the course of the season. So the Cavs are more or less the same team that they were last year. They re-upped with Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, and Isaac Okoro. So all 5 of their starters are now contractually locked up for each of the next 3 seasons, including Isaac Okoro as presumably a bench player. He usually will only start if one of their main guys is out of the lineup. The Max Strus addition has been really fun for their offense in the sense that, a lot of times we talk about 5-out offense as a concept of the ball moving from side to side and guys dribbling off of ball screens, but it can be a lot more complicated than that. And we're going to talk about this when we get into the Magic as well. But having a real movement shooter is another dynamic that comes in with 5-out offense. Not just the side-to-side flow and having Max be able to come off of a dribble handoff and look to shoot, but also an off-ball player movement, which is an important part of occupying help defenders to open things up for your main ball handlers, right? And I went back and I watched game 1 of the Magic Cavs series this year. I watched it on Monday morning as prep for the Cavs as well as for the Magic as we were coming up on them in this list. And the very first play of that series for the Cavs was a really, really nice example of beautiful 5-out offense. Darius Garland came up the floor. He ran a ball screen that flowed into a dribble handoff for Donovan Mitchell coming off the opposite end of the floor, who then swung the ball, and that flowed into kind of like a Chicago action coming out of the corner. It's a pin down into a dribble handoff where Max Strus comes flying off of it. And as he comes flying off, Darius Garland sets the first screen. The second screen, I think, was Mobley, if I remember correctly, and Max comes off of it. Good pick. Darius throws a good pick. And so when that second pick comes, Max gets plenty of separation and he just gets that left foot, right foot down in textbook shooter footwork and rises up off the move and knocks down that 3. He's been a really greaser of the wheels, so to speak, in that Cavs 5-out offense because of his ability to hit 3s while on the move, or at least his willingness to take them. Including Strus and Georges Niang, definitely helped with their spot up efficiency, which was their ultimate goal with those moves. If you guys remember 2 years ago, the Cavs were 20th in spot up efficiency according to Synergy, the rate at which they converted spot up possessions into points. That went all the way up to 9th last year with the additions of Strus and Niang. So definitely a significant increase there. That said, though, they actually dipped in offensive efficiency as a team from 8th to 16th year over year, despite them massively increasing their 3-point volume. They went from 24th in 3-point volume to 8th in 3-point volume. But the main driver there, the reason why their offense slipped, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell combined to miss 25 more games than they did the previous year. So a lot of offensive progress last year for the Cavs, even though it didn't necessarily show up in the metrics. The Evan Mobley issue on the offensive end kind of like took a different form this year in the sense that like he actually improved substantially as a spot up guy. 2 years ago, Evan Mobley was converting spot up possessions at 0.61 points per possession. Last year, he got it all the way up to 1.04. That's like a gigantic improvement. That's almost like a 2x year over year improvement. And he went from atrociously bad to actually slightly above average. But the main issue, the issue that rose in the Knicks series, which was his inability to score on the roll, actually took a dip. He went from 1.09 points per possession in roll man situations 2 years ago to 1.01. So roughly a 8% decrease in his efficiency on the roll. Still shot just 39% on hooks and floaters and shot just 57% on layups, right? So for a big guy like that, we're hoping in the mid 60s for layup efficiency, hopefully overall at the rim closer to 70, right? So like that's the real issue with Evan Mobley is just when he's catching in the middle of the floor and he needs to make a quick move for a floater, a quick like drop step into a left shoulder hook, or even if he just needs to finish in traffic in a way that's not an easy dunk, he just can be relatively inefficient there compared to his peers. And that's really the crux of the issue because Donovan Mitchell is awesome. Jared Allen is a rock solid NBA center. Max Strus is what he is, but Evan Mobley has significant offensive limitations. And then Darius Garland, even though he's a productive offensive player in the regular season, has consistently gone down a level when he's run into high-level NBA playoff defenses. So far in Darius Garland's career, in 17 playoff games, he's getting just 17 points per game on 53.6% true shooting with just 5.5 assists. That is both of those numbers, including the efficiency, significant drop-offs from his regular season production. And that is while he's also Cleveland's most targeted player on the defensive end of the floor. And so he goes from being kind of like a net positive in a big way for the Cavs in the regular season to somewhat of an issue when he gets into the postseason. And really, you have to look beyond the individual production, even for Donovan Mitchell, and just look at the fact that the Cavs offense just hasn't been successful when they get to the playoffs. They had a 104.7 offensive rating in the playoffs last year. That's putrid. The year before, when they lost to the Knicks, they had a 101.9 offensive rating. That's even worse. Last year, when they played teams in the top 10 in point differential in the regular season, they went just 10-16 in overall record. And when they played against a top 10 defense, according to Cleaning the Glass, they scored just 111.3 points per 100 possessions in the regular season, which ranked 21st among NBA teams against the top 10 defenses in the league. And so like pretty consistently when the competition ramps up for the Cavs, they can't score. And that really is the main issue that puts a hard ceiling on this team. Their core five guys last year, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, when they shared the floor together, they were just plus 1.4 net per 100 possessions. And so there seems to be kind of like a ceiling here. And they're essentially locked in for the next 3 years with what I think is the seventh best team in the Eastern Conference. Boston is clearly better. New York is clearly better. Milwaukee is clearly better. I think Indiana's better. Philly, I think, is pretty clearly better. I even think Orlando will be better than them this year. Obviously, Cleveland got the advantage in the playoff series over them last year, but they were trailing big in Game 7. Orlando upgraded a starting spot, and their young players have a lot more potential for improvement year over year. I think Orlando is going to be better than them. So, and it's, I get it. Not everybody has access to top tier free agents and the ability to manipulate the agent market to pull consistent high level talent. So like not everybody gets to be a Boston, and have $30 million players. So I get it. But at the same time, like you're essentially locked in to a play-in team with the way this is currently constructed. You might be able to leap one of those teams as a regular season team due to injuries or maybe just inconsistency of effort. And maybe you get into that 5 or 6 spot, but it's very possible that you're a play-in team, and it seems very unlikely that they'll win a playoff round this year. And so again, like I've been preaching about this for a long time, and maybe this is something they look to do over the course of this season, but I would look to turn Darius Garland into more of a forward weapon. And then I would try to slide Max Strus to the 2. I don't know who that is. Maybe that's a Brandon Ingram. Maybe that ends up being a Julius Randle. I'm not sure who it ends up being in the long run. But at a certain point, I think the Cavs need to be a little more aggressive. TD Tutty taking it to the house. In for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing is for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. You can also bet on who's going to win the Super Bowl. Right now, DraftKings has the Kansas City Chiefs as the favorite at +500, followed by the San Francisco 49ers at +600. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. You know, whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. With a 4-mode drive switch, you're in total control of your ride. I mean, there are Hall of Fame point guards who don't have this level of control. And the Camry's got flash to match. We're talking available 19-inch multi-spoke alloy wheels and chrome dual-tipped exhaust. I mean, this is a seriously good-looking car. And the all-new Camry's got the comfort to go with the looks. Standard dual-tone automatic climate control will have you and your passengers right in their comfort zone. This is the complete package. There are no weaknesses in the Camry's game. You don't see that often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has difference-making fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Number 16, the Sacramento Kings. Significant offseason for them. A lot of roster turnover. They lost Harrison Barnes, Quis Duarte, Kessler Edwards, JaVale McGee, Davion Mitchell, and Sasha Vezenkov. They added Devin Carter, their first-round pick, guy I really like, but he injured his shoulder, so he's not going to be available at least for the start of the season. Jalen McDaniels, the brother of Jaden McDaniels from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jordan McLaughlin, a backup guard from the Minnesota Timberwolves, more of a defensive-minded guy. Orlando Robinson, a backup center who was playing for the Miami Heat last year. And then DeMar DeRozan, a high-usage two-guard we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about today. That was the splashy move that Sacramento made. Their new depth chart at guard, really guard-heavy. De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, Devin Carter, and Keon Ellis, who started for them in the playoffs and towards the tail end of the season last year. I should say not in the playoffs, but at the tail end of the season last year. Because they didn't make the playoffs. The forward position, they're a little thin. They have 3 guys that I look at as legitimate rotation guys: Keegan Murray, Trey Lyles, and Jalen McDaniels. So when you got 6 guards and 3 forwards that presumably can play for you, that kind of like tends to push towards the obvious inevitable outcome that they will make some sort of consolidation trade where you try to turn some of that guard talent into talent at the forward position. The guy that kind of like obviously stands out there for me is Kevin Huerter, because DeMar DeRozan is clearly just going to slot into that starting spot. He was already looking like a lesser option than Keon Ellis anyway, because of Keon Ellis's ability to defend at the point of attack. And so like, I think that Kevin Huerter ends up being the obvious guy that you could see Sacramento try to turn into a forward prospect or a forward rotation piece at some point this season. At center, Domantas Sabonis, Alex Len, and Orlando Robinson. Question is, who's going to start at the forward spots? So again, as we know in the past, it used to be Herter at the 2, then Keegan Murray at the 3, Harrison Barnes at the 4, and then it turned into Keon Ellis at the 2. But that's obviously going to be DeMar DeRozan now. So the question is, with Harrison Barnes gone, are you sliding Keegan Murray to the 4 and then cramming Kevin Huerter in at the 3? Or are you just moving Trey Lyles into the starting lineup? My guess is that's what they'll do. My guess is they'll end up starting the season with Trey Lyles at the 4, and then you roll with Fox and DeRozan in the backcourt with Keegan Murray at the 3 and Domantas Sabonis at the 5. But that's just, again, a really weak defensive front line, which it already was under Harrison Barnes, but that it's not super vertically athletic. It's not a group that is great at contesting shots on the front line. And that just puts a lot of trouble or responsibility on your perimeter defenders. And again, if we're talking De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, and DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray has shown a lot of defensive potential. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. De'Aaron Fox, I think, that's a huge untapped part of his game that we might get to see more of in the future. But as a core right now with those 3 perimeter guys, it's not a lot of defensive pedigree there at that point in time. So we'll get a little bit more into the defensive end here in a minute. But my guess is that they'll look to bolster that front line at some point in the future with Kevin Huerter in a trade. The DeMar DeRozan fit I actually really like. I think he brings a great combination of scoring and playmaking that'll work really well in dribble handoffs in the Kings system. Was one of the most efficient shot creators in the league last year. He made all 3 of our high volume lists. Those of you guys who watched our player rankings videos will know what I'm talking about. Yeah, 1.06 points per pick and roll. That was 8th out of 15 players to run at least 1,000. 1.15 points per ISO, including passes. That was 2nd out of 24 players to run at least 250. So 2nd best ISO player in the league. And then 1.11 points per post up. That was 3rd out of the 18 players to run at least 250, including passes. That was just behind Jokic and LeBron. So he's going to eat up a ton of usage and he's going to generate high quality offense for you with that usage. That's going to open up a lot in terms of resources of energy that De'Aaron Fox was having to spend throughout the season last year. Malik Monk was a guy that was capable of taking up usage, but there was a little bit more of an inconsistency factor there. And then anytime you tried to play him alongside De'Aaron Fox, things got a little bit undersized. Things could get a little bit sketchy on the defensive end. Now, DeMar DeRozan obviously brings his own defensive limitations, but at the very least, you're a little bit bigger and a little bit more, got a little bit more strength and girth in that starting lineup. But what I like is it frees up De'Aaron Fox on offense to be more picky and efficient, meaning he doesn't have to take as many bad shots when he's tired because he can actually depend on his co-star there to eat up that usage successfully. And then the second piece of it is it'll allow De'Aaron Fox to devote more resources to the defensive end of the floor, which I think is an area of De'Aaron's game that is really untapped at this point in his career. I saw a lot of reps during that Warriors series in the playoffs 2 years ago where I was like, man, this guy has the potential to be a truly outstanding guard defender in this league. And so if you put him next to a guy that can eat up massive amounts of usage, then he can be more picky and be more of a 23, 24 point per game guy that is a all defense candidate instead of a 28 point per game guy that picks and chooses his spots on the defensive end of the floor. With that, even though it might hurt De'Aaron Fox in terms of his overall scoring output, I think it will increase. It's something like a version of himself that looks like that, I think would earn him more respect around the league and also would make the Kings a better basketball team, which is really the ultimate goal here, right? One of the big question marks for this season is what type of ceiling can Keegan Murray get to as a two-way player? He was actually the best ISO defender in the league last year to hit at least 100 ISOs defended. He allowed just 0.68 points per possession on 113 reps. Really good at understanding his advantage's length, meaning he gives a little bit more space so that he can contain the drive, and then he offers great contests after absorbing contact. He anticipates which direction the player is driving, beats him to the spot by virtue of the fact that he can give more space, and then he's got the long arms to close that gap and get really good contests. He again, 113 ISOs defended last year, just 0.68 points per possession allowed. But he was a 29th percentile ball screen defender. Now, some of that is their front line. Again, anytime you're defending a ball screen, there's two sides to that bracket, right? There's the big guy and his ability to bother the ball handler, and then there's the back pressure element, right? But on film, I watched a bunch of clips of Keegan Murray defending ball screens, just kind of refamiliarize myself with it this morning. He did not navigate screens very well. He was a little slow with his back pressure. And so combined with that front line, they need Keegan Murray to just do a better job just staying attached in those trailing situations where he has to navigate screens. And again, like if they're going to have any chance to make real noise in the Western Conference, especially with DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis on the floor and a weak power forward, you're going to need Keegan Murray and De'Aaron Fox to be all defense level defenders. Maybe not receiving the award, but certainly in that conversation to make any real noise. And then on the offensive end, he increased his scoring volume last year, but he did take a dip in efficiency. And the main reason why there is he massively increased the volume of pull-up jump shots he was taking. He took 66 2 years ago, took 196 last year, but only got 0.85 points per shot on them. So like a lot of long twos, not hitting them at a super high rate. That's going to hurt his efficiency. But he's going into year 3 now. So what type of improvement can he make on both ends of the floor? That's a major swing factor for the Kings this year. In summary, I expect the Kings to take a leap offensively this year. They were 13th in offensive rating last year. I could see them getting up to 6 or 7, just with more consistency of shot creation. But I could also see a dip for them on the defensive end of the floor. DeMar DeRozan is not a good defender, and they're very limited on the front line. Last year, if you guys remember, they finished the year with Keon Ellis in the starting lineup. He's more of a traditional 3-and-D guard, and they had some really high-level defensive performances sporadically throughout the season. Now you're going to be having De'Aaron Fox and Keegan Murray take the primary perimeter assignments every single game. That's a lot to ask for them. So a lot is going to come down to how they do. As of right now, though, I have the Sacramento Kings as a play-in team. Number 15, one of the most interesting teams going into next year, the Orlando Magic. A little bit of roster turnover. They lost Markelle Fultz, Joe Ingles, Chuma Okeke, and Admiral Schofield. They added Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's the splashy addition for them this summer. Jared Culver, a former lottery pick, 2-guard from who was originally drafted by Minnesota. Corey Joseph, backup point guard. And then they drafted Tristan Da Silva in the first round, who is a kind of traditional 3-and-D wing type of prospect. So presumably KCP is going to get the Gary Harris starting job. That'll put our starting lineup at KCP, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter Jr. I think Orlando Magic fans are going to love KCP. I obviously covered him very closely with the Lakers as a fan rooting for that team and then eventually covering the league. And I also covered him very closely with the Nuggets. That's a team that I covered extremely closely over the last 3 years, right? He's getting a little bit older and a little bit more worn down. He's 31 years old now, but I have a little bit of a positive outlook on that we'll get to in a little bit, and that has to do with Jalen Suggs. We'll get to in a minute. But he is just a rock-solid starting guard in the NBA. He's a very good guard defender. He can struggle a little bit against size and strength, guys that can overpower him, right? We saw that in the second-round series against Anthony Edwards. He just was hopeless guarding Ant, but Ant is built like an F-150, you know? But I also saw that back when he was with the Lakers, whenever the Lakers would use him to guard opposing forwards. He just would struggle with those types of matchups. But against guards that don't have outstanding size and strength, he pressures the ball really well. He navigates screens well. He applies back pressure. He's actually one of the better point of attack defenders in the league. He just needs to be aimed at somebody that's not quite as big and strong. But that is where the Jalen Suggs factor is a huge advantage. KCP was the primary point of attack defender in Denver. Jamal Murray was not getting those types of assignments. Aaron Gordon was guarding bigger forwards, right? So having Jalen Suggs to, one, be able to guard the bigger, stronger types of guards, and two, to primarily put KCP on the second best perimeter initiator for the other team, that is going to make a 31-year-old guard who looks a little bit on the downslope into a guard that's actually staying within matchups that he can handle, which will make him look younger and more effective than he was last year in Denver. And so I actually look at this as an interesting move for KCP's career, because now he's slotted more in an achievable role for him on an elite defensive team. And I think he's going to benefit from that. He's also a very good off-ball defender. He's always where he's supposed to be. He shoots passing lanes well. He can jump those gaps. Just does his job on every single possession. He is a rock-solid NBA starter. Again, I think Magic fans are really going to like him. On offense, KCP is a master at scoring on the margins. He's a good spot-up player. He converts spot-up possessions at 1.16 points per possession. That's in the 82nd percentile. That ranked 27th out of 119 players in the NBA last year to log at least 200 spot-up reps. So a very, very good floor spacer. He's an excellent transition player. He was over 80th percentile in both volume and efficiency for transition scoring last year. He's a very fast straight line runner. When he runs the rim, he's a very good leaper off of his left leg in single leg jumping situations, which allows him to extend and get the ball to the backboard before defenders that are pursuing behind him. But he also runs his lane to the corners well. He can run and quickly get his feet set in transition in the corner, knock down corner threes. He's a very good three-point shooter from the corner. He knocked down 42% of his corner threes last year, so very effective transition scorer. And he's a legitimate movement shooter. Whenever he's curling around screens or slipping out of guard screens, he can quickly get his feet set on the move and knock down shots. And as we know, that's a significant part of the Magic's offense. They run a lot of inverted ball screens where they'll have Franz or Paolo with the ball, but they'll have someone like a Gary Harris or a Jalen Suggs set the screen and then quickly slip out of it and try to make themselves available at the three-point line. And those guys can knock down those shots, but they are not as consistent with it. I think KCP comes in immediately as a better movement shooter than both of those guys to help kind of unlock a little bit more of that inverted ball screen game that Orlando likes to play. Again, just a rock-solid starter, a legitimate upgrade over Gary Harris. I think that Magic fans are going to love rooting for KCP. The strength of this Orlando Magic team in totality is their defensive end of the floor, right? They finished third in defensive rating last year. They did a wonderful job in the playoff series of grinding Cleveland's offense down into the mud. It's not hard to figure out why. They have top-tier guard defenders, right? Jalen Suggs is about as good a guard defender as you'll find in the league. Gary Harris is also solid. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is better than Gary Harris too, so it'll be even better this year. So they can get after the damn basketball. They can pressure the ball, but they also have a ton of interior size behind that. This is a massive front line with Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., Jonathan Isaac. When he's out there, they have a ton of length and size on the interior. So you combine good perimeter defense that funnels into a ton of interior size, and they are a dominant defensive rebounding team. They grabbed 74% of opponents' misses last year. That was the second best mark in the entire NBA. So that's just an end of the floor that I don't worry about. Elite defensively in just about every phase, an elite defensive rebounding team. That's not something I worry about. I think they're going to be another top 3 defense in the NBA this year. The offensive end is where Orlando gets really hard to watch. Obviously, the numbers aren't pretty. Just a couple examples for you guys. They were 22nd in offensive rating last year, 30th, so dead last in three-point volume, three-pointers made per game, 24th in three-point percentage, 28th in assists. Here's the weird one, 27th in fast break points scored per game, 25th in overall transition frequency, according to Cleaning the Glass, 24th in transition efficiency, according to Cleaning the Glass. So they don't, for an athletic team that defends really well, they don't capitalize on that in transition, which just feels like a waste of an opportunity there, which we'll get a little bit more into in a little bit. But I want to start in the half court because it's just a really ugly brand of offense. I rewatched, as I mentioned earlier, game 1 of the Cavs Magic series earlier this week to help prep for both of these teams. And it's just jarring to watch the difference in ball and player movement between those two teams. I talked about how the first possession for the Cavs, they come up the floor and they run a beautiful 5-out sequence with 2 different ball screen actions that switch sides of the floor. And then they switch sides of the floor again for a Chicago action with Max Strus coming off and hitting a movement jump shot. You go over to the other end of the floor, Orlando just consistently walks the ball up the floor and everyone stands around while Franz or Paolo decide if they want to go one-on-one. And if they decide not to go one-on-one, they'll call for a guard to come set a screen and then slip out of it. And then so many of those Paolo ISOs turn into tough fadeaway jump shots that he just doesn't hit a high percentage of. Franz tends to get a little closer to the rim and he takes more floaters, but he's been nightmarishly bad as a jump shooter. He shot below 30% overall in field goal percentage on jump shots last year. So like it just was an issue, right? And when they get into the half court, it's so stagnant. There's no off-ball movement. There's no getting the ball from side to side. There's no flowing into multiple actions on the same possession. It just is ugly. It's ugly basketball to watch. And like a lot of it is personnel. I want to be clear, but there are ways to get more out of that personnel and make things easier for them. So there are two main areas where I'm looking for improvement for from the Orlando Magic this year. One, I want them to look to score in transition more frequently. You're a dominant defense. That means you're going to get a lot of live ball rebounds, right? Live ball defensive rebounds where you can get up and down the floor. You're also a very athletic team. You're athletic now, especially in a different way, in the sense that KCP is one of the best transition scoring guards in the league. So when you struggle to score in the half court, you need to try to turn defense into easy offense as much as possible to supplement that and to avoid that static half court situation as much as possible. Then, two, when you get into the half court, incorporate more ball and player movement. Now, to be clear, I understand some of the reason why teams like Orlando don't move the ball a ton, right? When your primary ball handlers are bigger bully ball players, forwards, like Paolo and Franz, most NBA defenses will just switch actions that are involve those big guys because you don't want to ask your big forwards on defense to navigate screens. That's always a recipe for disaster. So teams will do a lot of switching. So screening actions aren't as effective. But this is where I actually want to use the Lakers as an example because I actually think they're a perfect example of why that shouldn't matter when you're designing your offense. The Lakers have a similar construct on their front line. They have Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis, three really big offensively gifted forwards. And they ran into similar issues 2 years ago. Teams were switching against their front line, things were getting stagnant, and they were a bad offense. Now, to a lesser extent, because they have a lot more talent offensively, but a similar issue in terms of a ball handling big front line that teams were switching against a lot. In 2023, they were 15th in assists and 19th in offensive rating. So an average ball movement team and a bad offense. But then they moved to a lot more ball and player movement in a 5-out context last year, and their offense exploded with the exact same front line. In their last 46 games last year, they were 4th in assists and 3rd in offense, just by getting the ball flowing from side to side and having more on and off ball player movement, right? Now, to be clear, the guard ball handling situation in Orlando is not as good as Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell, right? So I'm not expecting it to look as fluid and nice as it did for the Lakers towards the tail end of the year last year. But KCP is an awesome 5-out guard. He can make a play coming off of a dribble handoff, but he's also an extremely gifted off-ball cutter and screener. We talked about this in the Cavs segment, right? Like 5-out offense, there's a lot of misconceptions about 5-out offense. One, you need a shooting 5. No, you don't. The Warriors run a beautiful 5-out attack with 2 non-shooters on the floor at all times. It's not about that. It is about ball and player movement going from side to side. And then 2, thinking that it's about flowing only with on-ball action, meaning like a lot of people think 5-out is like DHOs and ball screens just alternating sides. That's a way that some teams play 5-out, but that's not the only way. Another way to play 5-out is to have your bigs, your non-shooting fulcrums or whatever you want to call them, operating at the elbows while you're running off-ball screening actions. The Nuggets are really good at this, right? Like Jokic will be dribbling at the elbow and like you'll have KCP and Jamal Murray like screening for each other and like one of them will go to get a dribble handoff from Jokic, but then the other guy will just quick slip to the basket and Jokic will throw him a pass, right? That's where you use the guys at the elbows as passing fulcrums while the dudes are running off-ball action looking to slip to the three-point line into the rim for easy catch and shoot threes and layups when teams botch switches, right? So like KCP may not be able to dribble the way that D'Lo and Austin does, but why can't you have Paolo and Franz operating around the elbows the way they do a lot, but then just have an off-ball action running nearby them that either one will occupy help defenders so that Paolo and Franz operate with more space, or two, give them opportunities to throw passes over the top for easy offense off the ball. Again, more ball in player movement. 5 out does not mean you take the ball out of Paolo and Franz's hands. It's just as simple as running a lot of the same stuff you do with more off-ball ball in player movement, right? Clearing the side. Run a two-man game with like Jalen Suggs and Paolo like you always do. And then just have KCP screening and cutting along the backside while guys are moving, and it will make life easier for you. Again, I'm not expecting the Magic to turn into a well-oiled machine on offense. Certainly not right away. But if they incorporated more of those sorts of things and they built that rhythm over the course of the season, it might just squeeze a little bit more out of this sponge. When you're a top 3 defense and a top 3 rebounding team, you only need to be average on offense to be a real threat to win. If you can get up into that 11 to 15 range on offense, now all of a sudden you have a shot to win the conference in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And this is stuff in the long run that will make this a better team. There are very few teams in NBA, I can't even think of one off the top of my head, that don't have ball and player movement in that win. It's a difficult style to win. You've got to get the ball moving from side to side. You got to get the ball popping around. Last piece of this, Paolo and Franz have to become better jump shooters. Specifically, Franz has to become a better catch and shoot shooter, and Paolo needs to become a better off the dribble shooter. Franz was overall 12 for 41 on jump shots in the playoffs and shot below 30% in the regular season. His jumpers just broke. Got to figure that out. Paolo actually shot his catch and shoot jump shot pretty well in the postseason, but he took 58 pull-up jump shots in that 7-game series and got just 0.86 points per shot out of them. That ended up hurting his efficiency. He ran 46 ISOs in that series and got just 31 points, including passes. That's just 0.67 points per possession, which is awful. So again, like Franz has to be able to knock down an open catch and shoot jumper when his man's helping off of him. Paolo needs to be able to become more efficient as a scorer in those ISO situations. For me, I love him to turn more of those like left shoulder fades where he's taking really tough fades and turn them more into hooks. There's a reason why like NBA 2 guards will take tough left shoulder fades. They're freaky vertically athletic, and they're typically shooting over tall, lanky wing defenders. Paolo has a size advantage on everyone. I'd love for him to turn those more into a physically aggressive move that's a hook rather than a fade over that left shoulder. He basically doesn't take hooks right now. He made 6 all season and made 0 in the playoffs. I think that's a part of his game that he could build out. But improving as a jump shooter overall for both players is important. Paolo just being a little bit more of a bully ball player rather than a fadeaway jump shooter, I think would go a long way. But I'm very excited to watch the Orlando Magic this year. They are built to one day be a great playoff team because they defend, they rebound, and they're really physically imposing. They can drag games down into the mud. But they have to find ways to make things easier for them on the offensive end of the floor. And there are just some proven ways to do that that are untapped for them, including running the ball more in transition and just more ball and player movement in the half court. I have them as the 6th best team in the East this year. The teams above them are all just a little bit more older and experienced, and they made some substantial improvements to their roster over the offseason as well. But this team, obviously, the sky is the limit with their young players and the growth that we project for them over the course of the next few years. Very much looking forward to covering them closely this year. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We'll be back on Friday with 3 more teams. I will see you guys then.